Hello, and welcome to the Watcher's review of Galaxy 4, a story of two battling factions of aliens, of good and evil, both facing survival. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you can be alerted to more content. The TARDIS brings the Doctor, Vicki and Stephen to a planet where they find themselves in the middle of two alien races having crash-landed and facing a fight against time and each other to leave before the planet's imminent destruction. Galaxy 4 marked the beginning of William Hartnell's third season, and was by now the only surviving member of the main cast that had featured in the debut story An Unearthly Child. Initially, Hartnell's characterisation of the Doctor was a grumpy, impatient individual who was at times at odds with the original TARDIS crew, in particular with Ian Chesterton. However, over time, he mellowed into a kinder, caring and protective character, which seemed to progress with the change of the TARDIS personnel, starting with Susan's departure in the Dalek invasion of Earth, and Ian and Barbara's departure in The Chase, and leading to the introduction of Vicki Pallister, who joined in the rescue, and Stephen Taylor, who stowed away on the TARDIS at the end of The Chase and was formally introduced as a companion in The Time Meddler, which brings us to the main cast of the story of Galaxy 4. We see the TARDIS land at the beginning of the story, and while I previously mentioned that the first Doctor had mellowed out over time, he still applies his assertiveness to a squabbling Stephen and Vicki in the TARDIS in the same manner a teacher would in the classroom. But this is brief, and upon looking at the planet's surface from the TARDIS monitor, he sees the time to explore the planet as an opportunity for scientific curiosity, but some peace and relaxation in the planet's seemingly lifeless environment. Not long after leaving the TARDIS, the crew have their first encounter with a Chumley, a small, mushroom-shaped robot which is keen to assess the three main characters, and through its movements, the Doctor assesses that it is blind, with other observations that there may be others on the planet. This is quickly confirmed when they are seemingly rescued from the Chumley by the Drahvins, who introduce them to their leader, Maaga. Upon hearing Maaga's story about the Drahvins being stranded due to irreplaceable damage to their ship and their ongoing battle with the Rills, who are also stranded on the planet, the Doctor doesn't allow himself to become drawn in by Maaga's story so much to feel sympathetic, especially when using negative connotations to the Rills in her description of them, as well as describing Vicki and later Stephen as prisoners, while the Doctor is allowed to leave and assess the Rills himself. This leaves the Doctor still applying some of his rudeness and unappreciation towards Maaga and the Drahvins. Nevertheless, here the Doctor acts as a neutral, as he can be by trying to promote pacifism to Maaga by taking up the Rills' offer of the Drahvins leaving with them on their ship, which still has the ability to be repaired. However, when confirming the Rills' peaceful nature and Maaga's intention of annihilation, the Doctor is resigned to leaving her to her own fate when ultimately helping the Rills to leave the planet before its destruction. The traits shown here of the Doctor being a pacifist and lacking appreciation of those who oppose him are all now hallmarks of the Doctor character, but it is with William Hartnell's incarnation of the character that shaped and evolved these, and if you go back and watch the early Hartnell stories, you can see that steady evolution. Leaving Maaga's fate based on her own selfish, destructive tendencies is the Doctor's wanting to apply pacifism at its very best, and foreshadows some of the third Doctor character traits when John Pertwee took on the role. He knows that there isn't a way of convincing Maaga to lead to the Drahvins peacefully, but by the same account, he doesn't attempt to sabotage them or hinder them, and will let them carry on by their own means while assessing the Rills. Ironically, the only sabotaging the Doctor does in the whole story is when he tries to break the Rills' breathing apparatus when still not being sure of them, something he later feels embarrassed about when the Chumblies repair the damage on the Rills' behalf. This was Stephen Taylor's second full story in Doctor Who, following his introduction towards the end of the previous season. A space pilot from the future, he is somewhat a replacement to the character of Ian Chesterton in dealing with action scenes and scenes requiring physicality, as well as being able to hold incredible intelligence and understanding the scenario that the characters fall into. Also, like Ian, Stephen is at times at a disagreement with the Doctor regarding the course of action to take in a situation. However, the pair are always there to defend each other, which ultimately allowed Stephen becoming one of the first Doctor's long-standing companions until his departure later on in the season in the story The Savages. Upon landing on the unnamed planet in Galaxy 4, the Doctor and Stephen instantly have different viewpoints of relaxation, with the Doctor wanting to take scientific investigations, while Stephen is wanting to take a more recreational approach by finding somewhere to swim. When they exit the TARDIS and encounter the Chumley, Stephen wants to attack it while the Doctor wants to analyse. Once in the company of the Drahvins, Stephen initially shows off some male chauvinist characteristics by initially warming to him because they are female and beautiful. However, like the Doctor and Vicki, upon hearing their story, he has a change of heart and sees them for what they actually are. Towards the end of the first episode, Stephen accompanies the Doctor back to the TARDIS so that they can properly work out how long the planet has before its destruction. However, the main bulk of the story, he finds his role switched with Vicki and is held prisoner by the Drahvins. He eventually plots an escape by putting doubt into the Drahvins' minds about Maaga treating them as second class in terms of the food they eat and the weapons they are equipped with, before overpowering one of them, although he eventually becomes trapped in an airlock before being rescued by Chumley. For the remainder of the story, he assists with the Doctor and Vicki by getting the Rills ship powered up with power from the TARDIS by hooking up the cable on the Rills ship, before leaving the planet with the Doctor and Vicki, just before the planet disintegrates. When Galaxy 4 was originally written, it was with the viewpoint of featuring Ian and Barbara rather than Stephen alongside Vicki and the Doctor. So when it came to production, there was no actual lines for Stephen, so the character absorbed some of Barbara and Ian's dialogue. Actor Peter Purves, who played Stephen, went on record saying he felt that the character had become feminised in this story as a result of the character being shoehorned in, and although that may be true in parts, in particular the scenes where Stephen is taken prisoner, but on the whole, I feel he shows some traditional masculine characteristics, in particular in his reaction to the Drahvins. Like Stephen, Vicki is from Earth's future and joined the TARDIS crew following the events of the story The Rescue. Young, inquisitive and intelligent, Vicki bears a lot of traits similar to Susan, who had left in the previous season, and upon her joining the TARDIS, she picked up the role left by her predecessor, with the Doctor becoming somewhat of a guardian figure to her. Following Stephen's arrival after Ian and Barbara's departure, she forms a double act with her counterpart somewhat in the brief time they were travelling together, either by sharing a lot of screen time or alternating roles within the story. At the start of the story, she christens the Chumley with its name when observed on the TARDIS monitor. She is initially held captive by the Drahvins for episode 1, for her and Stephen switch roles, and she travels with the Doctor to the Rills ship, and it is Vicki who is the first to meet the Rills after being initially trapped and separated from the Doctor. However, she quickly deduces that the Rills are peaceful creatures, as her and the Doctor form a friendship with them and work to side in with the Rills to get them off the planet. As previously mentioned, Vicki exchanges roles with Stephen early on in the story and acts as the main companion for the remainder, which is more than likely down to her lines being written with her in mind, while Stephen was shoehorned into the story. Although she does have significantly more to do in the story than Stephen, Vicki still doesn't have much to do by usual companion standards. Her being in captivity twice in the story is brief and doesn't require ingenuity to escape, and although she is the first among the main characters to come across the Rills, she does little else after that. You could argue that her main contribution to the story is providing the Chumleys with their name. The Drahvins are a race of female warriors at war with the Rills, and with this particular group, their ship crash-landed and is damaged beyond repair. They are led by Maaga, with the soldiers themselves being clones and bred for combat. When quizzed by the TARDIS crew about the male of the species, Maaga informs them they are kept to a minimum for certain jobs, with the rest being killed off to preserve resources on their home planet. Regarding the clone soldiers, they aren't given names other than 1, 2, 3 and 4, and go off Maaga's command. Having said that, they lack intelligence and come across as somewhat docile, acting purely off Maaga's orders, without any thought for improvisation, or understanding the concept of self-sacrifice to protect others. They are provided with inferior food and weapons compared to Maaga, who also considers them as disposable as a means to preserve resources or to protect herself. In comparison, Maaga is a calculated, sadistic, selfish individual with a hatred of the Rills and desperate to get off the planet before it is imminent destruction as a means of survival. Upon meeting Dr. Vicki and Stephen for the first time, she is welcoming and for a time hospitable. She initially tries to paint a picture of the Rills being the villains of the scenario and protesting her innocence. However, her negative connotations of the Rills being repulsive and her desire to kill them in order to commandeer their ship quickly removes the innocent facade, and the Doctor quickly establishes her as the antagonist of the situation. For the majority of the story, she controls situations from the wreckage of her ship and sends the clones out to capture, spy or combat against the Chumleys, Rills or the TARDIS crew, knowing that staying in the ship is the safest of the options she has available. Her desperation is heightened when the Doctor reveals the planet only has 2 dawns before its destruction, after seeing through his attempted deception over the time the planet has left. From this, she establishes that she isn't going to get the help from the Doctor that she wants, so keeps Stephen as an insurance policy on the ship while the Doctor and Vicki venture to the Rills ship. Although she needs to keep Stephen alive, she can't resist taunting him when he becomes trapped in the airlock during his attempted escape from the ship, and does this by removing the air very slowly. Once the Chumley helps Stephen escape, Maaga starts taking more evasive action, knowing she no longer has a hold over the Doctor. This is resorted to an attempted attack with her soldiers and herself by firing at the Rills ship and the TARDIS team upon their escape, whilst the Rills leave the planet before it disintegrates. Through her actions, she realises that she is going to die as the planet starts to disintegrate, but in the process of trying to prolong her own life and grasping onto any minimal possibility of survival, she pushes her soldiers out of the way to their death to help herself out. Maaga was played here by Stephanie Bidmead, making her only appearance in the show. The character portrays a certain level of threat due to her sadistic nature and desperation, and this is portrayed mainly through Bidmead's acting abilities, given that she has little action to do, and her threat factor heightened by Bidmead often looking down the camera as an indirect means of breaking the fourth wall. Unfortunately, Stephanie Bidmead never returned to the show in another role, as she passed away in 1974 at the age of 45 from motor neurone disease. Like the Drahvins, the Rills are trapped on the planet after crash landing. For half of the story, they are hidden away from view in their ship and use the Chumleys to go out on the planet's surface to form analysis. Due to this, we are reduced to Maaga's story about them to gather an impression of what they may be like. This eventually leads to the Doctor and Vicki to venture to their vast ship in order to establish contact. Whilst in captivity on their ship, Vicki finally gets a partial reveal of a Rill when she witnesses it observing from behind a screen. Together with the Doctor, they make contact with the Rills, who communicate through the Chumleys, as they aren't able to communicate verbally. From that point, they reveal to the Doctor and Vicki that they are pacifists, and explain that they offered to the Drahvins the opportunity to get them off the planet when their ship is working. They choose to remain hidden away due to not wanting to be seen, so that they don't offend any species that appear different. And also, they have a dependency on ammonia, which they breathe as opposed to us breathing oxygen. Another reason on their dependency for the Chumleys. Upon sympathising and understanding their predicament, the Doctor comes to a solution in which he helps the Rills in leaving the planet by charging their ship via the power from the TARDIS via the use of a cable. The ship becomes fully charged moment before the planet starts to disintegrate, and before taking off, the Rills become comfortable in fully revealing themselves to the Doctor, Vicki and Stephen, and resemble a large walrus-like appearance. What is interesting about the Rills is that they go against the norm of alien design and are opposite in every way to the Drahvins. They are peaceful pacifists who communicate through thought, where the Drahvins are warlike and communicate more through traditional methods. Outwardly, the Rills are initially unpleasant looking, although the Doctor highlights that difference does not necessarily mean being unpleasant. Whereas the Drahvins are initially beautiful, it masks over their unpleasantness. In short, given the budget limitations, the production team do go ambitious with the unique appearance of the Rills, but at the same time they limit their appearances to minimise that obvious budget limitation, given that the Rills only enter the story at the midway stage. But in all, a great example of not accepting things on face value. Galaxy 4 was the solo writing output from Australian and former teacher William Ems. The story had previously been written for Season 2, but pushed into Season 3 with the parts for Barbara and Ian rewritten to accommodate the Doctor, Vicki and Stephen. The original theme that Ems uses to underpin the plotline of Galaxy 4 is the theme of not taking things on face value, which as previously mentioned is highlighted through the differing appearances of the Drahvins and the Rills. Initially, Ems wrote the Drahvins as males, but producer Verity Lambert came out with the idea of making them female, which gives more depth into the appearance theme, with added connotations. Additionally, with the move of making the Drahvins an all-female group, it brings about a degree of feminism to the storyline. The throwaway remarks of the male of the species being disposable instantly builds an unseen civilization of all females with total control. Looking at the characters themselves, although their uniforms are representative of 1960s female fashion, they don't rely on their looks in order to assert power and control, or use of seduction, in particular to Maaga, who is military-like, when the rest of the Drahvins carries a form of aggression, which although isn't necessarily a factor of feminism, it does highlight their role as antagonists, and breaks away from the stereotypical norm in female characterization that existed at the time in 1960s television. One more addition that is written into Galaxy 4 is the use of flashbacks, which was hardly ever used in classic Doctor Who, especially during the 1960s. Whether this was written in by Ems himself or put in place during production, I'm not sure. However, it is cleverly used when Rills give a backstory to their initial encounter with the Drahvins when the ships first crash land on the planet. From there, they tell a story where Maaga ruthlessly killed one of the injured Drahvins, rather than waste time and effort on saving her, which by this point finishes the painted portrayal of Maaga being the ruthless antagonist she is. With this revelation only occurring just over halfway through the story, you're initially only presented with Maaga's version of events where she gives an account of the Rills killing the injured Drahvin, albeit without a flashback to assist the audience. Although you are certainly aware that Maaga's intentions are sinister, her version of events initially paints a shrouded mystery over the Rills, and potentially them also being antagonists, and the use of flashbacks convinces you as the audience that the Rills are peaceful pacifists that they claim to be. In all, a useful way of portraying mystery and revelation in the story. Galaxy 4 was originally to be directed by Mervyn Pinfield, whose previous credits included episodes 1 to 4 of The Censorites, episodes 1 and 2 of The Planet of Giants, and The Space Museum. In addition, Pinfield had also served as an associate producer, assisting Verity Lambert in getting the show up and running in 1963, and carrying on in the role until midway into Season 2 with The Romans. As well as Galaxy 4, Pinfield was scheduled to also direct the following story, Mission to the Unknown, as it was part of the same production block. Pinfield began directing Galaxy 4, but soon fell ill, leading to Derek Martinez replacing him. Unfortunately, this was to be Mervyn Pinfield's final contribution to Doctor Who, as he passed away less than a year later, in May 1966. Originally an actor himself, Martinez's style of directing lent more to the actors, and as such he had issues mastering the technical aspects regarding the sets and camera positioning, which are perhaps more heightened in a show such as Doctor Who. Although Martinez eventually got to grips with the technical side of things in Galaxy 4, it ultimately served as a baptism of fire for him, and the opportunity earned valuable experience. As originally planned for Pinfield, Derek Martinez directed Mission to the Unknown before going on to direct 4 more pivotal stories in Doctor Who's history, with the 10th Planet, which served as the Cybermen's debut and the first story to feature the Doctor regenerating, The Evil of the Daleks, The Ice Warriors, and finally the first ever Doctor Who story filmed in colour, Spearhead from Space. He carried on a successful career in TV directing up until the 1980s, covering shows such as Z-Cars, Blake 7 and Emmerdale. He passed away in 2014 at the age of 82. Design work for Galaxy 4 was carried out by Richard Hunt, who is also making his first contribution to the show. One of the key points in the design work is the look of the Chumleys. Small in stature, they consisted of layered domes inspired by the dome design of the Daleks. Since this was an age before the cheap availability of robotics and remote-controlled machinery, the Chumley props housed actors, which were supplied by a company called the Leicester Midgets. Sound effects specialist Brian Hodgson provided the Chumley noises with the use of oscillators, which represented their ability to communicate, and variations in pitch used to convey distress and assertiveness. While there is certainly no doubt in Richard Hunt's ambition and scope for the design work on Galaxy 4, it does unfortunately fall into the age-old trap of budget limitations that often hindered classic Doctor Who stories. Filmed entirely at BBC television studios, the look for a vast lifeless planet was reduced down to small sets with painted backgrounds that lacked depth, and a smooth floor surface rather than a rough terrain. Due to only episode 3 of the story being available in its original format, the job of animating the rest of the story for DVD release was designated to Digitunes Media and Entertainment. Rather than simply replicate the story from the original production notes, they have taken full advantage of the larger potentials with animation and today's technology, making the planet look more epic and vaster as originally intended, which also visually complements the story. Other additions include a flashback space battle between the Drahvins and the Rills spaceships that wasn't included in the original story, more detail to the Chumleys, and making the Drahvins, with the exception of Maaga, all identical, which keys in with the concept of being clones. In all, the animation helps finally realise what William N's script and Richard Hunt's design work ambitions and allows them to come to life. Galaxy 4 was originally broadcasted between the 11th of September to the 2nd of October 1965 in 4 episodes and served as the opening story of Season 3. It also marked the beginning of the end of the William Hartnell era, with this being the start of what proved to be his final full season as the Doctor. Verity Lambert, who had been producer since the birth of the show 2 years earlier, moved on from the production block of Galaxy 4 and Mission to the Unknown, and was replaced by John Wiles, who oversaw certain production aspects of this story. Hartnell's relationship with Wiles was less harmonious than what it was used to with Lambert, leading to disagreements over the show's content for the next season. Ultimately, John Wiles would only remain in the role for 4 stories, although one of them was the 12-episode epic adventure, The Daleks' Master Plan, and by the end of the season, Innes Lloyd had taken over as producer. Season 3 also proved to be a sign of audiences starting to wane in interest with the show, as although Galaxy 4 averaged roughly 9.9 million viewers over the 4 episodes, the season finale story, The War Machines, would only average a return of 5.3 million viewers. All of this, coupled with William Hartnell's ill health, meant that changes were needed, and Doctor Who would soon experience its first major overhaul, as a mere 13 months after Galaxy 4 had been broadcasted, the Patrick Troughton era of the show had begun. Regarding Galaxy 4, it is a story that I feel was, until the missing episodes were animated, a story that was always a curiosity without a lot of the detail being known about it. It doesn't hold as much gravitas as a lot of the other Hartnell stories, and for a long time slipped under the radar, and even when the announcement was made about it being the next story to be brought back to life through animation, it initially seemed strange how it had taken priority over some of the other missing stories of the era. However, in an ironic twist of fate, I feel that now, having seen the surviving footage and the reconstructed episodes, I feel that if the story hadn't been lost, then there would be a degree of undeserved negativity around it, given the lack of budget and technical abilities, falling short of the scope of what the story had in mind. But with the animation that has been provided, and the ambition has now been fully realised, and helps elevate the story to a new status. The narrative and concept brought about by William Emms offers some alternatives to other stories of the William Hartnell era, in regards to going against the stereotypes and connotations of good being beautiful and bad being ugly. Despite these ideas, I feel that the narrative is quite stretched out, with not much happening in parts of the story and the pace becoming slow. In hindsight, I feel the story would have been greatly benefited from being reduced from 4 to 3 episodes. So, that concludes my review of Galaxy 4. Of course, it is only my opinion, so feel free to express your own in the comments below if you think differently. Be sure to tune in for my next video. If you do have a suggestion for a story for me to review, then just let me know. But remember, it's the end that the moment has been prepared for.